Nobody said her name out loud, but they all looked when the passport caught fire. The flame licked the edge of the document, and the room shifted. Air turned sour with the smell of burning laminate, scorched cotton, and diesel breath drifting in from the tarmac. A hush fell like fog over Gate 29, broken only by the snap of a pen against plastic and the distant metallic clink of luggage wheels crossing tiled floors. Harper Lane did not flinch. She stood at the center of the storm, her breath shallow, the charred remains of her identity curling upward into ash. She had been through worse. That was not pride. That was a fact. The woman behind the counter, Callie Brewster, according to the name tag, held the lighter with theatrical poise. Her lips were tight with certainty. A few passengers gasped. One man raised his phone, already streaming. "Fraudulent documentation," Callie announced, voice sharp as a blade. "We have to protect the integrity of the system." No one moved. No one helped. They just watched the fire. Harper's bag slipped slightly from her shoulder. Inside, a wallet with embossed gold trim pressed against her hip. She made no move to retrieve it. A child asked his mother what was burning. The woman shushed him. Callie dropped the blackened remains into the metal bin like a magician discarding the trick. Smoke hissed upward. "There," she said. "Handled." A boarding pass, now dirt-smeared and folded, sat at Harper's feet. She bent to pick it up, her movement precise, controlled, almost ceremonial. The first-class stamp shimmered faintly on the corner. A few in the crowd saw it. Fewer understood what it meant. "That yours?" Callie asked, leaning forward with a grin that carried no warmth. "Not anymore." Harper's silence deepened. It was the kind of silence that spoke of long roads, of classified terminals, of rooms filled with men who never apologized. It was the silence of someone used to not being believed until it was far too late. The PA overhead announced final calls. Flight 782 to Atlanta. 21 minutes until doors closed. Harper stood with the pass in hand. She had not moved an inch when the first airport officer approached. Officer Nathan Hodge, mid-40s, gray starting to crawl into the beard. He scanned the scene, then looked at the remains in the bin. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. "Fake passport," Callie answered before Harper could speak. "Burned it." She tried to pass off a counterfeit. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You burned it?" "Standard discretion," she replied smoothly. "Since when do gate agents burn federal documents?" Harper watched the exchange without blinking. Her phone vibrated against her thigh. It buzzed once, then again. The display showed a name she knew well. She ignored it. "She refused to provide alternative ID," Callie added. "Probably got a bag full of fakes." A murmur spread through the passengers. Someone whispered something about stolen identities. Someone else muttered about terrorism. The truth had already slipped through the cracks. Nathan turned toward Harper. "Ma'am, do you have anything to say?" She looked at him and nodded once. "My identification was valid. You are now in possession of the remains of a legitimate federal document." "You got anything else to prove that?" Her voice was low, measured. "Yes." She knelt slowly, opened her bag just enough to reveal a chain with a badge, gleaming under the airport lights. Nathan leaned closer, squinting. His expression shifted. "What is that?" Callie stepped forward quickly. "Probably another fake." But the shine was unmistakable. The eagle emblem, the seal, the clipped badge number etched into steel. Harper rose and laid the wallet flat on the counter. Her credentials stared up from the leather fold like a courtroom photograph. Harper Lane, Chief Investigator, Aviation Risk and Oversight, U.S. Department of Transportation. Callie stepped back like she had touched fire herself. Silence thickened. Someone in the back muttered something about lawsuits. Harper's voice did not rise. She did not need it to. "You've just destroyed government property during an active investigation," she said. You've tampered with federal identification and obstructed lawful travel under a classified protocol." Nathan swallowed hard. Callie's face drained of color. "This isn't real. I mean, it can't be. You should have said something." "I was not required to explain myself to an airline clerk burning federal ID in front of a crowd," Harper replied. "You created this situation." Behind her, a younger passenger, a college kid in a hoodie, spoke up. "Y'all just let her torch a passport," he said. "I got it all on video." Others chimed in. Comments flew across live streams. The scene had already gone viral. A supervisor named Sharon Wallace pushed through the crowd. "What the hell is going on?" "Ask your agent," Nathan muttered. Harper closed her wallet and turned toward Sharon. "My credentials have now been made public under duress. Your employee set fire to a federal inspector's travel documents. I will require a full incident report and preservation of all physical evidence." Callie started to speak, but her voice caught. Sharon blinked. "You're serious?" "I am authorized under Title 49 to conduct covert inspections of aviation staff and service protocols," Harper continued. "This gate and this terminal are now under federal review." An eerie quiet blanketed the space. Nathan adjusted his radio. "Should we, call it in?" Harper finally looked at him directly. "You should have called it in 10 minutes ago." Callie's hand trembled on the counter. The burned remains still smoldered in the bin behind her, sending up one last curl of smoke. Passengers started filming again. Not for novelty now. For history. Harper Lane turned to face the glass wall of the terminal. Outside, the plane to Atlanta waited on the tarmac. Inside, she reached for her phone and tapped the emergency contact. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, but absolute. "This is Inspector Lane. The event has occurred. Proceed with secondary deployment. Full compliance review now triggered." She ended the call, eyes steady on the horizon as the engine flared to life and the world began, at last, to notice. The conference room sat 3 levels below the arrivals hall. No windows, just a ring of fluorescent lights and chairs with metal legs that scraped against the linoleum when anyone shifted. The door buzzed once before it opened. Harper Lane entered alone. Her trench coat was folded over her arm, revealing the badge clipped just below her collarbone. The heat from the morning incident still clung to her skin, but her hands were steady. Across the table, 4 airport administrators waited. Sharon Wallace sat at the head, hands clasped, eyes darting toward the empty seat beside her. Beside her, 2 legal officers reviewed printed statements, highlighting lines and whispering to each other. The 4th chair belonged to Agent Ellis Varnes. He arrived late, carrying a single yellow envelope and a travel mug that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cinnamon. "You walked them right into it," he said as he slid into the seat across from Harper. She said nothing. She slid her phone across the table. The video was queued up. 17 minutes and 42 seconds of continuous footage, captured from 5 passenger angles, all time synced and watermarked. Sharon reached for the play button. Harper stopped her with a quiet tap on the table. "Before you view the recordings," Harper said, "you should know that several of your employees appear in them. The footage includes verbal aggression, racial profiling, and document destruction." "We're aware," Sharon replied, her voice tight. "Callie's been suspended pending internal investigation." "That will not be enough," Harper said. The silence sharpened. One of the legal officers cleared his throat. "What exactly is your role in all this?" Harper opened her badge wallet again and placed it on the table beside the envelope Ellis had brought. The leather was still warm from the heat of the gate. Her credentials stared up at the men and women who, just 2 hours earlier, had dismissed her as a security risk. "I am Chief Investigator for Aviation Risk and Oversight, Department of Transportation. This facility was selected 6 weeks ago for unannounced compliance testing." I entered the airport under a sanctioned observation mission regarding systemic bias in identity verification. Sharon's knuckles whitened. Ellis dropped the envelope onto the table. It made a soft thump. Inside were printed reports, passenger complaints, timestamps, records of internal dismissals. Harper had read them all. She knew the names of every traveler Callie Brewster had flagged for document inconsistencies over the past year. The trend was obvious and damning. This morning was not an anomaly, Harper said. It was the culmination. She pushed the phone forward. The video began. On screen, Callie's face flickered with self-importance. Her words landed hard. "Fake passport," she said. "Protocol." The fire bloomed in slow motion. The crowd watched, silent and complicit. None of the administrators made a sound as they watched. At the moment when Harper revealed her badge at the gate, Sharon's eyes finally lifted. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. The footage ended with Harper placing the remains of her passport into an evidence bag. The badge chain glinted, unmistakable, as passengers murmured around her. A teenage girl could be heard saying, "She's the real deal." Harper let the silence stretch. Sharon finally spoke. "I didn't know about you, about any of this." "That is the point," Harper replied. "You were not supposed to know." Ellis leaned forward. "You've got 17 complaints in that folder. None resulted in corrective action." "That's not negligence. That's policy." "We can fix this," Sharon said quickly. "We'll retrain staff, review protocols, issue statements." Harper shook her head. "You cannot fix what you refuse to see. This was never about one gate agent." Ellis turned toward her. "We've got 2 more terminals flagged. You want to keep pushing this live?" "I do," Harper said. "I want every location processed the same way. Same risk profile, same silence." One of the legal officers interrupted. "You should understand, Chief Lane, this incident has already triggered legal review. We're looking at damages, possible federal action, viral media. This may not stay internal." "It was never internal," Harper said. "It became federal the moment your staff burned a government-issued document on record." Ellis opened the envelope and laid out a single page, a draft of the compliance audit. It included phrases like failure to act, pattern of disparity, staff conduct under scrutiny. Sharon stared at the words as if seeing them in a language she only partially understood. "My father used to fly out of this terminal every week," Harper said quietly. "He used to tell me the airport was a place where everyone was equal. Just names and numbers and gates. I believed him." She paused. "Until the day a TSA officer told him his name sounded like trouble." Ellis glanced over. Harper had never shared that detail before, not with anyone in the department. Sharon opened her mouth, but no apology came. "We'll need full access to all training records, incident logs, and passenger complaints," Harper continued. "We'll also need video footage from the last 60 days. "That's classified data," one lawyer objected. Harper reached for her badge again. "Not anymore." Sharon slumped back in her chair. "This isn't going away, is it?" she asked. "No," Harper said, "but that does not mean it cannot be made right." A soft knock came at the door. A young assistant stepped in, holding a stack of documents and a trembling phone. "You need to see this," he said. On the screen, Harper's name was trending. So was the footage. 400,000 views, then 500, then 6. The headline crawled across the bottom. "Federal agent's passport burned by airline staff. Civil rights investigation unfolds." The story had breached containment. Ellis stood. "You wanted proof of impact. There it is." Harper rose with him. She gathered her coat and badge, slid her phone back into her bag. Before she left the room, she turned once more. "You think the hard part is the media," she said. "It is not. The hard part is what comes next. The audit, the hearings, the federal enforcement, the public reckoning. Then she opened the door and stepped into the hallway, her shadow long and sharp against the polished floor. Behind her, the quiet was not peace. It was preparation. The city looked different from above. From the top floor of the Riverstone Federal Building, the skyline rippled in steel and glass, as if the truth below could somehow be kept out of view. The windows buzzed faintly under the weight of wind. Harper Lane stood behind the conference table, staring through the glass as clouds drifted over the city like a slow procession of silent witnesses. The room behind her smelled like paper and toner. Legal folders lined the table edge to edge. Across from her, Ellis Varnes leaned against a windowsill, arms crossed, eyes heavy with the weight of what was coming. "They moved fast," he said. 4 news outlets confirmed the footage. DOJ's Civil Rights Division is already watching. Harper said nothing. Her right hand rested lightly on the back of a chair, thumb tracing the worn edge of the leather seam. Her badge sat untouched on the table beside her. She no longer needed it to speak. The door opened quietly. Deputy Director Colleen Braith stepped in without ceremony. Her coat was still damp from rain. She dropped a file on the table, the thud low but final. "You blew the lid off it," she said. "Now everyone wants to know what we do next." Harper turned. Her expression gave nothing away. Colleen opened the folder. It held passenger testimonies, handwritten complaints, dozens of them filed and ignored, all with the same script. Secondary screening, aggressive tone, denied boarding, and a common thread: racial or ethnic appearance marked as irregular. "This wasn't one mistake," Colleen said. "It's a structure, built to appear neutral, trained to appear routine." Ellis pulled a chair out for Harper. She sat slowly, her spine straight, her eyes fixed on the pattern emerging in front of her. One incident had exposed the hidden design. Now the entire mechanism was unraveling. Colleen placed a single photograph on the table. It was taken hours after the fire at Gate 29. The metal bin still held the ash, but this time it was cordoned off, labeled, sealed for federal evidence. The photo was time-stamped. There was something tragic about it, like a gravestone made of steel. "We'll issue subpoenas for employment records," Colleen said. "If they fail to comply, we freeze their federal contracts. But I need you in front of the oversight panel. You're the only one who can speak to this without setting the room on fire." Harper's jaw tightened. "I'm not interested in being a headline," she said. "You already are," Ellis muttered. Harper turned to Colleen. "I will testify, but only if the panel agrees to make the findings public. Full transparency." Colleen hesitated. "You're asking to make the entire industry flinch." "I'm asking them to remember who the airport is supposed to serve," Harper replied. She stood, gathered the file, and walked toward the door. The hallway outside was quiet. Government quiet. Polished shoes, muffled voices, badges worn like second skins. Harper moved through it without needing to assert herself. She had become a presence now, familiar in the halls, spoken of in closed-door meetings, but still cloaked in silence. No one dared call her hero. Not yet. Not until they saw how far she was willing to go. Downstairs, the press waited. She ignored them. She slipped into an unmarked sedan. The interior warm and dim. Ellis joined her a moment later, tapping his phone. "You ready for what's coming?" he asked. "I've been ready since the moment she lit the match," Harper answered. They drove in silence. At the hotel, a plain envelope was waiting. No return address. Inside was a single sheet, a boarding manifest from 2 months prior, annotated in red. 7 passengers denied boarding, 5 of them flagged for extra screening. All carried valid documents. All shared surnames that drew attention. Harper recognized the pattern immediately. She opened her laptop and began to build the grid. Names, times, outcomes, notes about demeanor, coded language used to rationalize profiling. Uncooperative. Nervous. Unusual tone. The spreadsheet expanded, revealing a lattice of assumptions built into the day-to-day mechanics of air travel. It was no longer about Callie Brewster. It had never been. This was about something colder. A protocol that rewarded instinct over evidence, that hid bias behind procedure, that allowed identity to be questioned not because of a flaw in the document, but because of a flaw in the eye of the person reading it. The next morning, Harper walked into Terminal D. She wore no badge, no coat, just a dark suit and an air of quiet finality. The staff at the gate looked up but said nothing. A new shift had started. They had all seen the video. They knew her face now. She moved past them toward the security line. At secondary screening, she paused beside a young woman being pulled aside. The woman clutched her bag, confused. Her English was soft, her posture small. Harper stepped closer. "What's the reason?" she asked the agent behind the counter. The agent straightened. "Random screening." Harper watched his eyes. There was no randomness in them. She reached into her bag, pulled her badge, and held it low, out of sight from passengers but in clear view of the agent. He blanched. "Do it properly," she said. The woman was allowed through without further questions. Outside, the wind picked up across the tarmac. Planes climbed into the sky, their bellies glowing silver in the light. Harper stood near the window, watching one disappear into the clouds. Ellis texted a single line. "Panel confirmed. You speak Thursday." She responded only once. Then let them hear everything. In the distance, a new day rolled across the runway, indifferent but open. And Harper Lane, once misjudged, once silenced, prepared to speak not for herself, but for every passenger who had ever been made small beneath someone else's suspicion. The hearing chamber smelled of old microphones and polished wood, a place built for statements made under pressure, not truth told freely. Harper Lane sat at the table in front of the panel, flanked by Ellis Varnes on her left and 3 empty chairs to her right, left intentionally vacant by those who preferred to remain absent from discomfort. The committee members filed in slowly, some with pens already uncapped, some with eyes already narrowed. Above them, the state seal was carved into the wall, flanked by the words, "Oversight, Accountability, Service." Words that had not aged well. Cameras rolled quietly along the edges of the room, disguised in matte plastic, but humming just loud enough for Harper to hear. The public seating behind her filled with silent observers, legal aides, agency representatives, journalists with notepads already half full. No one clapped. No one greeted her. This was not a celebration. It was an autopsy. The chairperson, Senator Margaret Caulfield, tapped her gavel once. A hollow sound, more ceremonial than corrective. "We are here to review the findings of the Department of Transportation's internal compliance investigation following the events at O'Hare Terminal," she said. "We welcome Chief Investigator Harper Lane, who has agreed to provide sworn testimony." Harper stood, placed her hand on the small Bible provided by protocol, and repeated the oath with measured clarity. When she sat again, her voice did not rise. "On the morning of the incident, I was operating under full federal authority to observe and assess discriminatory patterns in document verification at commercial airline gates. My identity was deliberately concealed to test whether appearance alone could trigger procedural escalation." Senator Caulfield adjusted her glasses. "And it did." "Yes, it did," Harper said. "My passport was burned, my authority dismissed, my silence mistaken for guilt. Not because of what I carried, but because of who they assumed I was." The room held still. One of the junior panelists, Representative Clark, leaned forward. "How long have you been conducting these audits?" 7 years, Harper replied, "across 13 states. This was not the first profile-triggered incident I've encountered, but it was the first time someone destroyed federal identification in public, on record, while claiming to uphold policy. "Do you believe this was an isolated mistake?" "No," she said. "I believe it was standard behavior given room to grow bold." Ellis slid a report toward the panel. It contained redacted interviews from staff, timestamps from gate logs, archived footage of other passengers pulled aside without cause. "Bias isn't loud," Harper continued. "It's quiet. It's procedural. It hides behind checklists and random selection boxes. It doesn't shout racial slurs. It whispers doubt into the system and lets the algorithm finish the work." A ripple passed through the gallery. Someone dropped a pen. The sound echoed like a sentence punctuated too hard. Senator Caulfield spoke again. "You said in your initial report that you believe public trust in federal travel protections has eroded." "I did not say it," Harper said. "The numbers did." She tapped the folder in front of her. "Complaint rates in the past 5 years have risen by 38% in terminals with poor staff diversity. 39% of those complaints include language that points to profiling. And of those, 92% are dismissed internally without investigation." "What was different this time?" Representative Clark asked. Harper looked up at the cameras. This time, they burned the evidence where everyone could see it. She paused. This time, silence could not bury the truth. Senator Caulfield glanced toward her colleagues, then leaned back. "I watched the footage, Chief Lane. I watched that gate agent hold your passport over flame like it was garbage. I saw the crowd. I saw the officers. I saw you say nothing while they stripped you down without touching you. What I want to know is why you waited. Why you let it burn before saying who you were." Harper met her gaze. "Because no one ever believes the quiet voice first." A long silence followed. Then Ellis slid a second document forward. "This is the compliance matrix," he said. "Proposed structural reforms to gate procedures, bias monitoring, audit protocols, and disciplinary thresholds. Chief Lane and I have spent the last 6 months building it." Senator Caulfield flipped through it briefly, then looked back at Harper. "Do you think it's enough?" "It's a start," Harper replied. Another member of the panel spoke next, a young senator from Nevada who had spent most of the hearing in silence. "You have a daughter, Chief Lane?" "No," she said. "I have no children." "Then why do you keep doing this work, After everything they did to you, why keep fighting?" Harper's answer came without pause. "Because I have nieces, and they will travel someday, and I will not have them inherit a system that doubts them before it sees them." Ellis sat straighter beside her. For once, he had nothing to add. Senator Caulfield gave a small nod. "We'll be reviewing the matrix. Pending final review, we intend to introduce a joint resolution requiring federally monitored bias tracking in all Class A terminals." Harper did not smile. She stood. Before she left the microphone, she said one last thing. "It was never about the fire," she said. "It was about the match being struck with confidence, and no one asking why." As she walked down the aisle, cameras pivoted toward her. Journalists leaned forward, but she kept her pace slow, her posture tall, her expression unreadable. In the back row, a teenager stood and started clapping. Others followed. Not loud, not celebratory, but like rain beginning on a tin roof, steady, unignorable, and honest. Outside, the wind had shifted east. Planes descended overhead, wings stretching like quiet sentinels. And Harper Lane, no longer invisible, walked into daylight carrying the weight of change on her shoulders and the strength of restraint in her silence. The hotel room overlooked the river, but Harper Lane never opened the blinds. She preferred the half-light, the quiet between sunrise and noise. It was early. The street below had not yet begun its daily rhythm of taxis and arguments. The hearing replayed on her muted screen, subtitles crawling across the bottom like a confession that had finally found its way into daylight. She stood barefoot on the carpet, one hand resting on the desk, the other holding a half-finished cup of black coffee. She had not slept. Not really. Too many faces haunted the space behind her eyelids, people she had passed through without being seen, passengers flagged for nothing more than existing in the wrong skin, the wrong accent, the wrong moment. Ellis knocked once before entering. He carried a manila envelope and a look that hovered between fatigue and vindication. "It passed," he said, setting the envelope on the desk. "Unanimous vote." Harper nodded. No smile. Just the shift of someone who had already anticipated the outcome, but refused to celebrate something that should have been inevitable. "The resolution will force every Class A terminal to implement real-time bias monitoring," Ellis continued. "They're calling it the Lane Act." She flinched at the name. "I didn't ask for that." "You didn't have to." The envelope contained the first deployment schedules, 14 airports, a rotating team of federal monitors. Anonymous travelers trained to observe. Algorithms that could flag interactions based on voice tone, posture, repetition. "Technology won't fix what people refuse to see," Harper said. "No," Ellis agreed. "But it will stop them from pretending they never saw it." She turned toward the screen again. The hearing's final minutes played without sound. Her face looked smaller on video. More human. Not the symbol some already wanted her to become. A message pinged on her phone. It was from Colleen Braith. One line. "You're scheduled to brief the secretary next week. DC wants you visible." She put the phone down. Ellis sat on the arm of the couch, scanning the briefing notes. "Do you know who reached out last night?" She looked over. "Callie Brewster, the gate agent." Harper said nothing. "She asked if she could apologize to you in person." The silence that followed was not cold. It was considered. Harper crossed the room, poured water from the glass carafe on the table, and sat in the chair across from him. "I don't need an apology," she said. "I need accountability." Ellis leaned forward. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Harper opened the envelope again, eyes scanning the rollout protocol. Each audit would be blind, each monitor unmarked. The system would log all discrepancies. Travelers wouldn't know they were being observed, but staff would. That was the point. "Do we have compliance officers yet?" she asked. 7 confirmed. We're still vetting more." "I want the first team in Miami." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "High volume, high tension," she said. "If the system survives Miami, it'll survive anywhere." He nodded. "You going to supervise that one personally?" "I will for the first 72 hours. He exhaled. "You ever stop?" She looked at him. "You ever ask me to?" He didn't respond. Later that morning, she walked along the river. The wind pressed against her coat, lifting the collar slightly. Downtown was waking up. Newspaper stands opened. Coffee carts hissed steam into the crisp air. No one recognized her. Not in this part of town. She was just another government worker with a laptop bag and tired eyes. A pigeon fluttered past her, wings flashing silver. She watched it disappear over the bridge. Movement out of the corner of her eye caught her attention. A woman standing beneath a concrete overpass held up a cardboard sign. Harper had seen the face before, in an incident report. The woman had been detained for trying to use a tribal ID card. The airline had rejected it. The woman looked up. Their eyes met. No recognition. No anger. Just 2 people in motion, sharing the same street. Harper reached into her bag and pulled out a card. No words, just a number and a seal. A reporting line for passengers denied boarding due to document disputes. She handed it to the woman, who took it silently. "Thank you," the woman said, voice low. Harper nodded once and walked on. She reached the edge of the park, where the river curled back toward the skyline. Her phone buzzed. This time, the name on the screen read, Secretary Marjorie Keene. She answered. "Chief Lane," the voice said, warm but clipped. "First, congratulations on the resolution. Second, I'd like to offer you the Directorship of Civil Rights Compliance. Full oversight. You'll build it, lead it, own it." Harper looked out over the water. "What happened to the current director?" "He resigned after the hearing." "I see." She waited. "You don't have to decide now," Secretary Keene said, "but we need your answer by Monday." Harper ended the call without promise. She watched a barge drift slowly along the water, leaving a wake that rippled all the way to the embankment. Back at the hotel, Ellis was reading reports on his tablet. When she entered, he looked up. "You okay?" She removed her coat and set it on the back of a chair. "They offered me the division." He blinked. "That's what we hoped for." She nodded slowly. "Then why do you look like you just lost something?" Harper turned toward the window, opened the blinds for the first time that day. The skyline glinted like a knife. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the burned edge of her passport photograph pinned to the mirror. Only half her face remained. "I didn't lose anything," she said. "I just finally see the cost of winning." The door closed behind her with a soft click, muffled by layers of soundproof glass. The room was warmer than she expected, and smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Harper Lane stepped into the office, not as a visitor, but as the newly appointed Director of Civil Rights Compliance. The plaque on the door had already been changed, her name etched in brushed nickel beneath the seal of the Department of Transportation. The assistant greeted her with polite efficiency, handed her a folder of orientation materials she would never read, and motioned toward the inner office. She paused before entering. The room had belonged to others before her. Men with long titles and short memories who answered emails but ignored evidence. She walked in slowly, letting the silence settle. The desk was sleek, the windows wide. On the far wall, a series of framed commendations looked out of place. Too ceremonial. Too empty. She placed her bag on the desk, unzipped the side pocket, and removed one item. The burned fragment of her passport. She set it upright on a clear acrylic stand, charred edges visible, the faint outline of the federal seal barely discernible through the melted laminate. Half her photo remained. The rest had turned to ash in the hands of someone who had never cared what it cost to get that passport in the first place. Ellis Varnes stepped into the doorway holding 2 coffee cups. "Your assistant says you haven't touched the briefing packet." "I lived it," she said. He handed her a cup. Black. No sugar, no cream. "Miami just filed their 48-hour report," he said. "System flagged 3 false screenings, all course-corrected within 90 seconds. First time that's ever happened." She sat down, her body easing into the chair as though it still did not believe it belonged there. "And the agents?" she asked. "Retrained immediately. No protests. The software logs every decision now. There's no hiding in procedure anymore." She nodded slowly. "Good." He leaned against the edge of the desk, his tone shifting. "There's something you need to see." She looked up. He slid a slim file toward her. No markings. Just a date. 2 weeks ago. Inside was a report from O'Hare. Not from federal monitors. From the airline itself. It documented an incident at Gate 12, an elderly man traveling with his grandson. The boy had been detained for using a tribal enrollment card. The supervisor had overruled the agent, citing new federal oversight protocols. The supervisor's name was Callie Brewster. Harper held the paper longer than necessary. Her thumb paused on the signature line. It was real, handwritten, sharp strokes. No denial. "She didn't just apologize," Ellis said. "She changed the behavior." Harper handed the file back. "Then let her keep changing it." Outside, clouds moved low across the Washington sky. Rain threatened but hadn't fallen yet. The city held its breath like it was waiting for permission to exhale. Harper opened her laptop. The interface blinked alive, dozens of audit feeds streaming simultaneously from terminals across the country. Miami, Atlanta, Denver, Seattle. Tiny windows into gate after gate, all anonymous, all watched. She clicked through a few, each one a world, a life unfolding at the speed of protocol. "Did you ever think it would actually happen?" Ellis asked. "That we'd build something this permanent?" She tapped her finger lightly against the desk. "I didn't know it could be built until I watched them burn it down." Her phone buzzed. A message from Secretary Keene's office. Tomorrow she would stand before a press corps and announce the full implementation of the Lane Act. There would be lights, cameras, microphones too close to her face, a podium with a seal and a promise that things were changing. But today she wanted silence. Ellis stood to leave but hesitated. "There's one more thing," he said. "You were requested. Personally." "By who?" He hesitated. "Sarah Levinson, the teenager from O'Hare, the one who streamed the video." Harper's expression shifted, an invisible weight adjusting inside her. "She's in town, wants to interview you for a student media project. Says your story changed what she wants to study." Harper turned back to the window. She already studied it. She just didn't realize she was the one writing the curriculum. Ellis smiled faintly. "So, should I tell her yes?" Harper glanced at the charred passport on her desk. "Give her 15 minutes. No edits, no staging." He nodded, then paused at the door. "People are watching now, Harper. Everything you do." She nodded. "Good. Let them learn how to listen." After he left, she sat in stillness for several minutes. Her eyes traced the ridges of the skyline through the window. Buildings like authority. Heavy. Built to last. But even they cracked under enough pressure. She picked up the phone and dialed a number from memory. A line that bypassed secretaries. It rang once, then connected. "This is Lane," she said. "I want every terminal filing raw bias metrics by quarter. No summaries, no interpretation, raw numbers. And I want them published." "Publicly." The voice on the other end started to object. She cut them off. "Transparency doesn't wait for comfort." She ended the call. On her screen, a passenger was being waved through at Terminal C in Minneapolis. No questions, no extra screening. A quiet moment. Unremarkable to anyone but the person walking away without being told they were suspicious. Harper watched it longer than she needed to. Then she closed the feed and turned back to her desk. The charred passport fragment stayed where it was, not as a reminder of what had been done to her, but of what she had refused to become. The cameras were already in place when Harper Lane arrived. Not the flashbulbs of news vans or the towering rigs of national press. These were quieter, mounted to walls, embedded in ceiling panels, their lenses the size of a fingernail. The Department of Transportation's downtown media room was designed for one thing: visibility without distraction. A podium stood beneath a soft light. The seal gleamed on its front. Rows of folding chairs faced forward, most filled with reporters clutching tablets and federal passes on lanyards. A screen behind the podium glowed blue. One word hovered there, in white lettering: compliance. Harper waited in the wings, her badge clipped to a plain charcoal suit. The lapel bore no rank. She had asked for that specifically. She did not need to be a symbol. She only needed to be listened to. Secretary Marjorie Keene stood beside her, arms crossed, heels quiet against the tile. "You're about to reshape the entire travel sector," she said. "How does that sit with you?" Harper's voice was calm. "Like overdue weather." The secretary gave a dry smile. I've briefed heads of agencies for 20 years, and I've never seen one so careful about saying nothing until it matters. I've spent my life being spoken over, Harper replied. I learned the value of saving breath until the room is quiet enough to hear it. A production aide gave the signal. Keene stepped forward first, welcomed the room, summarized the initiative. Then she turned toward the curtain. Director Lane, she said, will now address the media. Harper walked to the podium without looking at the crowd. Her heels clicked only twice before she stopped. She waited. Long enough for the rustle of papers to settle. Long enough for side whispers to fade. Then she began. There are two things I want you to remember from this moment forward, she said. First, not all harm shouts. Most of it whispers. Second, change does not begin with apology. It begins with admission. She reached into the folder in front of her and pulled out a photograph. It was the image of the burned passport remains, her own, photographed in a steel bin under fluorescent light, ashes black against chrome. This is the moment we stopped pretending the system worked for everyone. No one spoke. She continued. In the months since the Gate 29 incident, my office has reviewed 1,729 identity-based screening complaints. 87% involved no violation of protocol. What does that tell us? That the problem was never the rule book. It was who we trusted to hold the pen. A ripple moved through the room. A few reporters stopped typing. Harper clicked the remote. Behind her, the screen changed to a live display of current audits. A map of the U.S., dotted with terminals, each blinking with green, yellow, or red codes. One terminal in red pulsed slowly. Nashville. Every terminal now has real-time oversight, not theoretical, not reactive, live. She paused. This does not make us flawless, it makes us visible. From the back row, someone raised a hand. Director Lane, do you believe gate agents are being unfairly scrutinized under the Lane Act? Harper met his eyes. No. I believe they're finally being held to the same standards they enforce. Another reporter stood. There's concern the software is too aggressive, that it penalizes instinct. Instinct is what burned a federal passport, Harper said. Instinct is what flagged a woman for carrying dual language ID. Instinct is not justice, it's familiarity. And when familiarity only protects people who look like you, it becomes prejudice dressed in uniform. The room quieted again. From the side doors, Ellis entered late, slipped into the last row. He said nothing, but Harper saw him. It steadied her. We're not just changing forms and policies, she said. We're shifting power. From subjective discretion to objective accountability. The briefing ended without applause. It was not designed to inspire. It was designed to document. After the press dispersed, Harper stayed behind. She watched the map behind her fade back to blue. The room emptied. Only Ellis remained, leaning against a wall. You know you just made about 4 enemies for every ally, he said. Harper stepped away from the podium. Her voice was softer now, the steel tucked behind a layer of weariness. I didn't come to win friends. He nodded toward the empty seats. You sure came to leave something behind? I came to build something no one else could erase. They walked out together. Rain had finally started. Light, steady. The kind that blurred headlights and softened sidewalks. The driver waited with the engine running, but Harper didn't get in. Instead, she walked beneath the awning toward the edge of the plaza, where an old woman stood beneath a broken umbrella, watching the Capitol dome shimmer in the rain. Harper approached quietly. You were on the panel, the woman said without turning. You testified. I did. They talked about you on the news, said you embarrassed the industry. I told the truth. The woman looked at her then, eyes sharp despite the years behind them. My grandson wants to be a pilot, she said, but he's afraid. Harper listened. Afraid someone will stop him before he even boards. Afraid they'll ask the wrong question at the wrong time. Afraid someone like me won't be there to tell them they're wrong. Harper looked toward the dome. Then we make sure someone like me is. The woman nodded as if she already knew. They stood there a while longer. Two strangers, one history, and a future neither could name yet, but both had already begun to shape. The wind off the tarmac smelled like jet fuel and thawed snow. It clung to the collar of Harper Lane's coat as she stepped out onto the observation platform at Reagan National. The terminal buzzed behind her, but out here it was quieter. Only the dull roar of engines, the distant crackle of radios, and the rhythm of flight. Below, planes taxied toward their gates, some arriving from cities that had already implemented full compliance monitoring, others from places still waiting for federal oversight to reach their perimeter. Harper stood alone, hands in her pockets. It had been 93 days since the Lane Act had passed into law. In that time, passenger screening times had decreased by 7%. Complaint rates dropped by 23%. Misidentification incidents had nearly disappeared. The system wasn't perfect, but it was undeniable. Inside the terminal, Ellis Varnes was giving a debrief to a visiting Canadian delegation. He spoke calmly, gesturing toward the interactive map on the wall, walking them through biometric safeguard protocols, audit procedures, escalation review boards. The delegates nodded, impressed. They were already requesting copies of the architecture for adaptation in Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary. Harper didn't need to be part of that conversation. Her role had shifted. She was no longer the one pulling alarm bells in locked rooms. Now she managed the weight of those alarms after they'd been heard. She watched a jet descend through a halo of clouds. For a moment it hovered against the horizon like a suspended choice, then dropped out of view toward the landing strip. Her phone buzzed. She didn't check it. A voice approached from behind. Soft shoes, confident steps. "I was told you'd be out here," said Secretary Keene. Harper turned slightly. "I prefer the runway to the briefing room." "I think that's why the public trusts you," the secretary said. "You never looked like you were trying to be believed." "I wasn't." Keene stepped beside her, eyes scanning the airfield. "I wanted to tell you in person," she said. "The president signed the executive order this morning. All federal travel contracts must comply with the Lane Act within 1 year, no exceptions." Harper nodded once. "You made them act," Keene added, "by refusing to." Silence passed between them, broken only by the distant sound of tires kissing tarmac. The secretary glanced at her watch. "I'm heading to Chicago for the memorial." Harper didn't answer right away. "I wasn't planning to attend," she said finally. "You should. It started with you." "No," Harper said. "It started with what they did to me. What matters now is what they do next." Keene studied her. "You've spent your entire career fighting for people who never knew your name." Harper looked out at the airfield. "I don't need them to remember me. I need them to move without fear." The secretary left with a nod, her driver waiting at the curb. Harper remained on the platform a few minutes longer, then turned and walked back inside. At the gate, a child was crying softly as his father knelt to comfort him. The boy held a crumpled boarding pass in his hand. Harper recognized the gesture, the hesitation in the man's face as he looked toward the uniformed agent nearby, waiting for resistance, bracing for delay. But it didn't come. The agent smiled, nodded them through. Harper caught the brief flicker of relief on the man's face. A small thing, invisible, if you didn't know how to look for it. She walked on. Later that evening, she arrived in Chicago unannounced. No one met her at the terminal. She didn't request a motorcade or credentials. She hailed a cab like anyone else. The driver didn't recognize her, and she didn't offer her name. They drove in silence to the newly renovated wing of O'Hare. Gate 29 had been redesigned, expanded, refitted with bias monitoring kiosks, multilingual signs, a federally required transparency center. The screens displayed metrics updated hourly. Passenger satisfaction. Screening consistency. Disparity indicators. In the far corner of the concourse, a small plaque had been embedded into the wall, brushed steel, clean typeface. It read, "On this ground, identity was nearly erased, but silence did not win, because someone chose to speak after being made small." We remember that voice, and we listen differently now. No name was listed. Harper stood in front of it for a long time, not out of nostalgia, not even out of reflection, but because the plaque was never meant to mark a victory, only a turning point. Behind her, a group of high school students on a civil rights field tour paused to read it. Their teacher whispered something about the burned passport, about the live stream, about what happened after. One student, tall, quiet, maybe 15, turned and looked at Harper. He didn't say anything, but he nodded. She returned the gesture, then stepped away before anyone could draw the connection. Outside, the night air was colder than she expected. The sky above Chicago was black velvet, the planes carving clean arcs beneath it. As she walked toward the taxi stand, her phone buzzed again. This time, she answered. "Lane." "Director," said Ellis. "You didn't show for the live interview. I wasn't ready to speak again. You think they'll stop listening?" She looked at the wind curling beneath the streetlights. "I think they've just started." He paused. "There's another audit coming in from Phoenix. Same problem, different uniform." "Then we get there first," she said. "You always did like being early." She ended the call. A taxi pulled to the curb. She climbed in, the door shutting softly behind her. As the car merged onto the highway, Harper Lane leaned her head against the window and watched the world slip past in reflected neon. Terminals, runways, hangars, places that once erased people like her in silence. Now, because of her silence and what she chose to do after, those places listened. And they would never forget how.